Hey friends, I'm so happy that you're going to be reading with me today. Today we're actually going to start reading one of my favorite books, 26 Fairmount Avenue. So you're going to need your book and your packet. So if you don't have those things, pause this video and go get them. So, this book, 26 Fairmount Avenue, is by one of my favorite authors, Tommy DePaola. And that name should sound familiar because we read some of his books before, like Stregonona. And this book, 26 Fairmount Avenue, Tommy DePaola actually wrote it based on his childhood. So, it takes place when he was a child in the late 1930s, so about 80 years ago. And all of the things that happen in this book happened to Tommy in real life when he was a kid. This story actually got the Newbery Award honor, which is a special award given to books each year. It is awarded to the best book that came out that year. And so this book is considered to be one of Tommy's best books. And it's also the first in his 26 Fairmount Avenue series. So again, this story takes place in the 1930s, so a little over 80 years ago. And we live in Pennsylvania. Tommy lived in the state of Connecticut. So you'll hear him mention the city Meriden, Connecticut. That is where he lived. And in this first chapter, you'll also hear him mention about a hurricane, which is a very strong and powerful storm that has lots of wind, rain, and can cause a lot of damage. If you look at the beginning of your book, there is 2 pages that have characters on them. And these are all of the characters that you are going to see throughout the book. So we will see mom, dad, Buddy, and me is Tommy. So he writes in the first person point of view. His Nana, Tom, Uncle Charles and Viva, the Morins, Aunt Nell, Nana Fall River, Mr. and Mrs. Crane, and Carol Crane. So go ahead and open to the first chapter of the book where you see Tommy and his brother in front of a house, and it says Columbus Avenue, so that must be where this house is. And follow along with me as I read the story. So it starts off by saying, I didn't always live in the house at 26 Fairmount Avenue. We moved there when I was 5 years old. I know that because in 1938, when I was still 4, a big hurricane hit Meriden, Connecticut, where we lived. We had just started to build our first and only house when people told my mom and dad that the house was twisting and turning on its foundation, just like Dorothy's house in The Wizard of Oz. A real hurricane had never reached all the way up to New England before, so nobody was ready for it. Now we're on page 2. We were living in an apartment on Columbus Avenue. We all lived on one floor. Another family lived upstairs, and we lived downstairs. It had been raining for days and days, and some of the rivers were overflowing. There was a really weird brook near our backyard. It was called Harbor Brook. It wound all the way through Meriden, and factories dumped stuff in it. It was different colors on different days. We were told not to go near it. Right before the hurricane, the water was so high and murky that I was hardly allowed to look at it, much less go near it. Come away from there, Tommy, my mom would call. Right after lunch on the day of the hurricane, my mom was talking on the telephone when my dad came home early from the barber shop where he worked. My brother, Buddy, who was 8, was at school. His real name was Joe Jr., after my father. Dad and Mom talked in the kitchen. Then Mom said to me, Get your coat on, Tommy. We have to go pick up Buddy and some of the neighborhood children. There's a big storm coming, and they're letting everyone out early. We got in the car and drove to the school in the rain. A long line of cars and teachers with kids were waiting in front of the building. I looked up and saw something that I've never, ever forgotten. A boy was standing at the top of the steps holding an umbrella. All of a sudden, a gust of wind blew, a really strong gust, and the boy went up, up, up in the air and floated down the stairs just like Mary Poppins. It was scary driving home to Columbus Avenue, the car filled with kids. Buddy, Carol Crane, my best friend on Columbus Avenue, who looked just like the child movie star Shirley Temple, only Carol had red hair and Shirley Temple was blonde. The Addams twins, the Fournier brothers, and a few others, all talking and screaming. Branches fell off the trees. Leaves swirled around the car. A sign flew off Thomas Eddy's grocery store and just missed us. But we made it to our apartment. Mom let us out and we ran inside. Carol's mother, Mrs. Crane, was already there and she was really scared. Mrs. Crane was scared of storms, especially thunderstorms. If there was one clap of thunder, Mrs. Crane would be knocking on our door and calling my mother. Floss, Floss! That was my mother's nickname for Florence. My mother liked being called Floss, but she liked Flossie even better. My mom would open the door and Mrs. Crane would rush in, pushing Carol in front of her. Nothing would do except for my mom to get the bottle of holy water she'd gotten from St. Joseph's Church and sprinkle some of it on Mrs. Crane, who wasn't even Catholic. I guess she thought that Catholic holy water was better than nothing, and it must have worked because Mrs. Crane never got struck by lightning. On the day of the hurricane, my mom calmed Mrs. Crane down and promised she'd get the holy water, while my dad parked the car where there were no trees. First, Mom lit some candles because the electricity was out. Then she took the holy water and sprinkled some on Mrs. Crane. Everyone else wanted to be sprinkled too. Now we're on page 6. Mr. and Mrs. Morin and their daughter Althea, who lived in the apartment upstairs, came down. I guess they thought with all the voices and everything that it was a party. We crowded around the windows and listened to the wind howl and watched it blow stuff all over the yard. Tree limbs, lawn furniture, garbage cans, even a bird bath. Then it got really quiet. We looked up and saw a little round patch of blue sky through the dark clouds. That's the eye of the hurricane, my dad told us. I didn't see any eye, but before I could say anything, the wind picked up and the rain started all over again. I hope the new house is okay, my dad said as the wind roared by like a freight train. My mom pulled a book off the shelf and started reading a story to Buddy, Carol, the Addams twins, the Fournier brothers, and yours truly, just as she read to Buddy and me every night. Finally, 3 hours later, the hurricane of 1938 was over. People started coming out of their houses. Do you have electricity? Someone shouted. No, do you? Someone answered. I pestered my mom so much that she let me go outside with Carol, her father, Buddy, and my dad. Branches, large and small, and leaves were everywhere. We could hear sirens wailing. We walked to Hemlock Grove, a small forest of tall hemlock trees at the end of the block. It was a mess. Be careful, I don't think it's all that safe, one of the neighbors told us. Trees had fallen in all directions, crisscrossing each other like a giant game of pickup sticks. Some of those trees stayed there for a long time, and after we moved into 26 Fairmount Avenue and I felt brave, I'd take the shortcut to Columbus Avenue through Hemlock Grove. One tree lay across a little stream, and if you had good balance, you could walk across it. I guess 1938 was a special year, not only because of the hurricane, but because it was the year we started building 26 Fairmount Avenue. All right, so that is the end of chapter 1, a pretty exciting and eventful chapter for Tommy's family. You'll want to get your packet and open up to the chapter 1 questions. and you'll want to answer each question, and you can go back in the story to help you find the answer or to reread because that's always a good idea. So the first question says, from this line on page 8, trees had fallen in all directions, crisscrossing each other like a giant game of pickup sticks. The reader can tell A, the hurricane caused a lot of damage, B, pickup sticks is a fun game to play, C, trees crisscross each other when they grow, D, trees were the only thing damaged in the hurricane. You want to pick the best answer. Question number 2. Why weren't the people in the neighborhood prepared for the hurricane? Prepared means to be ready. A, the neighborhood usually has tornadoes. B, the neighborhood usually has monsoons. C, hurricanes usually cause very little damage in the neighborhood. Or D, hurricanes don't usually move that far. In other words, hurricanes don't usually come to their part of the country. Number 3, this chapter is mostly about A, Tommy's family and how they are Catholic, B, Tommy's neighbors coming over to Tommy's house, C, a boy who flew up in the air with his umbrella, or D, the hurricane and how it affected Tommy's neighborhood. And the final question, number 4, how did Tommy's mother distract the kids from the storm? A, she told them they were going to be fine. B, she told them to go outside and watch the storm. C, she read to them. Or D, she threw a party. If you need to go back and reread chapter 1, go ahead and do that. You can also rewatch this video and read along with me. Make sure to go, sorry about that. Make sure to go to the chapter 2 video when you are ready to begin the next chapter. See you then, friends.